Welcome to the discussion of phenomenology and reader response. How do you know what is real? Maybe the entire world and all the people in it are your dream. Maybe you're locked in the Matrix like Neo. Maybe you were raised on a TV set like Truman Burbank and everyone but you knows. What evidence do you use to determine reality? Phenomenology has the answer. The theory of phenomenology dominated European philosophy for the first half of the 20th century. Phenomenology locates reality within the subjective experience and then attempts to address the problem of the objective world. It interacts with the growth of psychoanalytic theory and stream of consciousness fiction, which focused on the activity of the mind as the site of reality. According to phenomenology, we can't know things in themselves, noumena, like Plato's ideal. What we know are phenomena, perceived or practical reality. We distinguish between reality and fantasy by using the senses, which rely on phenomena. Through the senses, we triangulate information and constitute or construct a perceived object. Objects are always partially indeterminate. We fill in the gaps. The reasoning, perceiving subject is noesis, and the object perceived is the noema. As an example, take a look at a chair or other piece of furniture near where you're working. How do you know it exists? You can see it and touch it. If you bump into it, it hurts. Your consciousness also can fill in the gaps regarding the other sides of the chair that are not visible from your position. You can infer that the other sides look the same as the one you're seeing. Maybe you know what the underside of the chair looks like because you've turned it over when cleaning. Your recognition of the chair combines retention of prior experiences with the chair, your current intention regarding the chair, and your protension about the chair in the future, perhaps the expectation that the chair will still be there tomorrow. I often think of Picasso's Cubism as reflecting this kind of constituting that our minds do automatically. In Picasso's Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, the women look twisted because we can see more of them than our single perspective normally allows, as if we can imagine those other parts. Another aspect of the phenomenological experience has to do with other people. The perceiving subject not only constitutes things, but also living beings. Because we know our own human experience, when we look at others, we constitute them as beings like us. We assume they are subjects who can think and feel, and also constitute the world like we do through their own perceptions. We feel empathy. In phenomenology, this recognition of other human beings is called transcendental intersubjectivity, and it is similar to the relationship between equals that Hegel identifies in the beginning of the master-slave dialectic. Part of the reason we believe an objective world exists, even locked as we are in our own subjectivity, is because transcendental intersubjectivity recognizes humanity in others and recognizes others' patterns of constituting the world. If every person we encounter also sees our chair and believes it to be real, so do we. Our intersubjective community constructs a mutual world. Reader response theory draws on phenomenology by tracking the reader's subjective experience when reading. While this kind of theory extends all the way back to Aristotle's discussion of audience catharsis, focus on the reader became popular in the 1970s, partly as a reaction to new criticism and formalism. After all, elements of form don't mean the same thing to every reader. The reader brings his or her experiences to bear on interpretation, causing form to operate differently reader by reader. Hans Robert Jauss focuses on the reception history of texts, bridging Marxism's interest in history and formalism's focus on aesthetics. He draws on the phenomenological ideas of retention, intention, and protension to posit a horizon of expectation. Each time a reader encounters a new text, intention, the horizon of his or her expectations, protension, is shaped by all of the other literature he or she has read, retention. Texts trigger retained knowledge and shape expectations through signals, like using or breaking genre rules and using allusions. This horizon can be posited for a culture as well as an individual, based on the assumption that readers at a particular historical moment will share an objective set of expectations. This cultural horizon is the transsubjective horizon. Because of the retained experiences of a culture with various texts, a culture's experience with a particular text at a particular historical moment will differ from a similar experience in other eras. Jauss is more interested in the cultural than in the individual response to a work, as he sees the psychological aspects of reading as problematic. Based on the transsubjective horizon, Jauss can claim that no timeless masterpieces exist. Canonical works that have survived through centuries do so because each subsequent readership confirms them as valuable in their own time period. The length of time a work has survived is its aesthetic distance from its original audience. The greater the distance, the more valuable the work, because subsequent generations have confirmed its value. The shorter the distance, the more the work of art becomes just entertainment art. This ongoing reevaluation of literature emphasizes the fact that texts operate in dialogue with readers, shaping them even as readers interpret. Wolfgang Iser focuses more than Jauss does on the dynamic interactive relationship between the individual reader and the text, the phenomenology of the reading experience. Texts present a repertoire that acts as a set of instructions for the reading experience. Iser calls this the virtual text, which is comprised of the artistic pull, the author's text, and the aesthetic pull, the reader's response to that text. So readers don't have total control over their reading experiences or their interpretations. The text dictates part of them. But the reader is responsible for filling in the gaps, just as the viewer does, as noted earlier, when viewing a chair, making connections among retained information, current intention, and expectations or protension. The referential field, comprised of components of the text, and the patterns of vacancies, invite the reader to make particular kinds of interpretations. And in that work, the reader is also transformed. Louise Rosenblatt is perhaps the most famous American reader response theorist and is responsible for popularizing the theory and also for its influence on education. She treats the reading experience as a transaction between the reader and the text. She also characterizes the transaction as different depending on the type of text. Efferent texts provide facts and elicit a fact-finding attitude in the reader. And aesthetic texts are artistic and require an aesthetic attitude from the reader, which differs significantly from that engendered by efferent texts. This differentiation appears in Jauss, who uses the terms poetic and practical language, but he doesn't focus on the distinction. Rosenblatt's terms connect with Iser's ideas in the sense that texts demand particular kinds of stances from readers. Given this emphasis on the reader's work in interpreting the text, I thought you might be interested in Jorge Luis Borges's Pierre Menard, author of The Quixote, which is a short fiction that appears to be a scholarly discussion. Hopefully you caught the humor in the discussion of Menard as the author, duplicating Cervantes' work word for word. When I read this text, I hear Borges talking not about plagiarism, but about readership. Menard is the good reader of Cervantes, attempting to capture the intended experience from the text. In doing so, he authors the novel in his mind. This accounts for the lack of drafts, as reading is an invisible process. This story suggests that more scholars should value the reading experience and devote scholarly attention to it.